I've got a watch on my wrist that's made me think twice about some of the comments I've made in the past, because this watch is from Baltic, and some of the original watches that I reviewed from Baltic, one of my complaints was that the watches are nice, their build quality is good, I like the designs, very vintage, but cheap movements, you know, the Chinese movements. I was always sort of saying, why don't they put a more expensive movement in the watch and keep the same design? Well, this is what I've got here. It's got a Valjoux 7750, and now that I've had it on my wrist, my complaint has been, why is this watch so expensive? So I think you can't really win either way. You're either going to get a cheap movement and be accessible, or you're going to get a better movement, same watch, and you're going to think, well, am I paying too much? Now this watch is an interesting watch because for those who know the Tour de France, Baltic actually sponsors a team in the Tour de France in the Auto version, and they've been doing it for the last 3 years. So this is an anniversary model that they've sent me to review, and I've got to say, on first impressions, the colors, the layout with that big eye at the 3 o'clock, it's lovely. It's very easy on the eyes, the movement is bulletproof, the fact that it's got a double dome sapphire crystal and screw down pushers which offer 100 meters of water resistance, I think this watch is designed for the motoring enthusiast as well as something of quality and longevity. Now in saying all that, after experiencing this watch on the wrist for several days, there's probably a couple of areas which I think definitely could offer room for improvement, for me anyway, and I'm going to share that in my room for improvement section. But overall, a nice piece, a very colourful piece, and also a quite unique design at that. Now Baltic has sponsored this video, so I will of course leave the links in the description section. If this watch interests you, by all means feel free to check them out. Now this is the Tour Auto limited edition version. So number one, it's limited to 400 pieces, which to me it's a bit of a bummer, but it's also a little bit more expensive than your standard Scalegraph. It's probably a couple of €100 more expensive, so bear that in mind in the course of this review. Now diving straight into the specs of this watch, I measure a case diameter of 39.5 with a case height of 14.2. The lug to lug is 47.1 and a lug width of 20. The crown is a signed push-pull crown, it's 6.8 millimeters, and the watch offers 100 meters of water resistance. And the total weight on the supplied bracelet size to my 18 centimeter wrist, I measure exactly 124 grams. Now 124 grams for a chronograph on a bracelet is not heavy at all, and it's been a pleasure, it's been a delight. I've actually worn the bracelet a little bit loose. I found that the classic taper on that bracelet, as well as its link size, has really aided in the comfort of this watch. Also, that clasp on the underside of the watch is very petite and seems to integrate well. But in saying that, if you look closely at that clasp, there's only 2 holes for micro adjustability. So that's an area which I think, even though Baltic is trying to draw inspiration from vintage watches and the vintage aesthetic, that definitely is an area which I think could offer room for improvement. Now turning the watch over, you'll notice there's a solid case back. As you can see, Tour 2025 Auto. Obviously this is a special edition for the Tour de France, and on this particular one it says 000 out of 400. Now I've never been a fan of limited edition watches, and this one here for me is not an exception. I think whether major brands or micro brands, it just creates unnecessary urgency and sometimes can force the consumer to buying something that they might not be ready to commit to. Now hiding behind that solid case back is the Sellita SW510M. It's a manual wind movement. It features 63 hours of power reserve, and again this one has been running rock solid. It's a tried and tested movement, again based on the Valjoux 7750 design, so in that department I've got no gripes whatsoever. Now the crystal on this watch is a double dome sapphire, and I'm glad they've used sapphire in this particular model. It just gives it a more robust feel and it's more practical in real world usage. Obviously it doesn't offer the same look on the dial if you had plexiglass, but it does have the benefits of strength and scratch resistance. Now if I turn my attention to the lume of this watch, it features Swiss Superluminova BGW9, and you'll notice on that handset it's quite liberally applied. There's also dots placed at every marker, and honestly, they're really not keeping up with that handset. But for a chronograph, I think the handset is doing a sufficient job. I really wasn't expecting much in this department anyway. Now, although I've enjoyed this watch on the bracelet, they've also supplied it with an Alcantara strap. It's a nice tone of blue, very comfortable, again offering the classic taper. So I think whether one or the other, the watch head seems to work well on either option. Now, one thing that I do like about Baltic is their case shape, the design. If you look at the side profile of this watch, you've got a conical bezel, a very thin side profile, and the vintage vibe coming off this watch is just superb. So design-wise of that case, I must say I'm really drawn to it. Now looking closely at that dial, it's your classic bi-compacts. There's two sub-dials, it's a classic big eye design. Even though it's got 3 sub-registers, the one at the 6 is not highlighted. You've just got a 12-hour scale that blends into the dial. So that's a really nice design touch, I like that. The legibility for a chronograph has actually been very good and extremely easy to read. Now you notice those pushers, they're screw down pushers. So you have to unwind both pushers to get accessibility to the chronograph function. And the reason they do that in this particular watch, when you finish using your chronograph, you simply wind them back in and the watch maintains 100 meters of water resistance. Now this watch has been smiling at me all day. I look at it on my wrist and it literally smiles at you. And the reason I say that because the applied markers around that dial are curved and adhere to the same shape as that chapter ring. So when you look at this watch and those markers catch the light, it really does look like it's smiling at you. And that's a nice little detail to have. Now lastly, the price of this watch comes in at €1,750. That's around 3,000 Australian dollars, and it's a little bit more expensive than their standard version. Obviously being a limited edition, a special edition for the Tour de France, and this is not their first rodeo. Like I said, they've been sponsoring the Tour de France for the last 3 years, and in those last 3 years they produced a limited version, and this is the 2025 version. Now, on all that note, what are my gripes and room for improvement of this watch? And first and foremost, legibility. Because I look at the handset of this watch, which is highly polished, and if you marry that up against that very light blue dial, sometimes you're going to find it difficult to get a gauge of what time it is on this watch. Second gripe for me obviously is that price. You're paying €1,750. I think the standard version of this is around 1,500, so it's a little bit more expensive. It's a couple of €100 more expensive than ideally it should be, but if it's a limited version, obviously if that's special for some people, they will be spending a bit more money. And the fact that it's limited, not my cup of tea. And I did mention that clasp. I know that Baltic are running a vintage theme here and they're trying to keep it as petite and vintage as possible. That's lovely, but that clasp, it's got 2 holes so you can really adjust one movement, either forward or backward. It's not enough. Now, in the watch's defense, coming in at around 120 grams or so on that bracelet, I've been wearing it a little bit loose, and I don't really have an issue wearing a watch loose, especially if it's a little bit lighter like this. But I think for this sort of money, a better clasp would have really been desirable. Being a pressed clasp, it just feels a little bit cheap and flimsy as compared to the rest of the watch. So hit me up in the comments, guys. Let me know what you think of this Baltic Scalegraph, the Tour Auto limited edition version. It's a big eye bi-compacts design. I like the design. I love the colors. I think the size and the footprint have been very good, and the comfort regardless of that bracelet, not having a proper toolless on-the-fly adjustment clasp. And if you're a keen racing motor enthusiast like myself, then you'll probably find this watch going really well at motorsports events, and that chronograph function will earn its keep and get a lot of usage. So be well, guys, be safe, continue to enjoy the hobby and the watch that's currently on your wrist, and we'll see you all in the next one.